Story 1. The Prescription That Shouldn't Exist. My name is Rachel Winters, and I'd been working as a night shift pharmacist at Riverside Pharmacy in Portland, Oregon for 6 years before the incident that made me question everything I thought I knew about reality. At 32 years old, I considered myself a rational person grounded in science and evidence-based medicine. The night shift suited me perfectly. Fewer customers, more time to focus on inventory and paperwork, and a peaceful quiet that allowed me to think clearly. I'd filled thousands of prescriptions, dealt with insurance complications, handled controlled substances with meticulous care, and prided myself on never making a mistake. Nothing in my pharmaceutical education or professional experience prepared me for what happened on November 14, 2023. The pharmacy was located in a strip mall on the eastern edge of Portland, nestled between a closed-down laundromat and a 24-hour convenience store. We stayed open until midnight on weekdays to serve the community, and I usually worked alone from 8 p.m. onward after my technician Sarah left for the day. The building itself was unremarkable. Fluorescent lights, white laminate counters, rows of medication shelves stretching back into the storage area, and that distinct pharmaceutical smell of plastic bottles and various compounds mixing in the air. On that particular Tuesday night, everything seemed completely normal when I arrived for my shift at 7:30 p.m. Sarah briefed me on the evening's activities as she gathered her belongings. "Pretty quiet tonight," she said, pulling on her jacket. "Just finished Mr. Henderson's refills, and there's one prescription in the queue that came in around 6. Insurance rejected it. Needs a prior authorization. I left a message with the doctor's office, but you know how that goes." I nodded, familiar with the bureaucratic dance of modern healthcare. She wished me a good night and left through the front door, the electronic chime announcing her departure. I watched through the windows as she walked to her car under the orange glow of the parking lot lights, started her engine, and drove away. Then I was alone. I settled into my routine, checking the computer system for any new electronic prescriptions that had arrived, verifying inventory counts, and preparing for the typically slow weeknight hours. Around 8:30, the computer chimed with a new prescription. I pulled up the details, expecting something routine. Antibiotics, blood pressure medication, perhaps insulin. What appeared on my screen made me pause and read it 3 times to make sure I was seeing it correctly. The prescription was for a medication called Temporazine, 50 milligram tablets, quantity 90, with instructions to take 1 tablet twice daily. The prescriber was listed as Dr. Michael Harlow, and the patient was named Jennifer Castellanos with a date of birth showing she was 28 years old. Everything about the prescription appeared legitimate at first glance. Proper DEA number, valid NPI, a local address for both doctor and patient. But something was wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. I'd been a pharmacist for nearly a decade, had completed my Doctor of Pharmacy degree with honors, maintained my continuing education credits religiously, and subscribed to multiple pharmaceutical journals to stay current on new medications. I had never, in all my years of practice and study, heard of a drug called Temporazine. Not once. My immediate thought was that it might be a brand name I wasn't familiar with, so I began searching our pharmacy database for the generic equivalent. Nothing. I expanded my search to include our entire inventory system, thinking perhaps it was a rarely prescribed medication we'd simply never stocked. Still nothing. Growing more puzzled, I opened our computer's internet browser and searched for Temporazine in the major drug databases we subscribed to. Lexicomp, Micromedex, Clinical Pharmacology. Each search returned 0 results. I tried variations of the spelling, thinking perhaps it had been misspelled in the system. Temporazine, 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 Temporazine. Nothing matched. I searched the FDA's database of approved medications, nothing. This was unprecedented in my experience. Even the most obscure medications, the ones prescribed once in a blue moon for rare conditions, appeared in at least one of these comprehensive databases. My rational mind began working through possibilities. Perhaps this was a compounded medication with a custom name, but the prescription didn't indicate it was for compounding, and Dr. Harlow wasn't a physician who typically ordered such specialized preparations. Maybe it was an extremely new medication that hadn't been added to the databases yet? But that seemed unlikely. There's usually at least some preliminary information available before a drug hits the market, and pharmaceutical companies don't keep their new products secret from pharmacists. I decided to call Dr. Harlow's office, even though it was now after 9 p.m. and I'd likely get an answering service. The phone rang 4 times before an automated message began. You have reached the office of Dr. Michael Harlow. Our office hours are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. If this is a medical emergency, please hang up and dial 911. For prescription refills, please press 1. To leave a message, please press 2. I pressed 2 and waited through another series of beeps. Dr. Harlow, this is Rachel Winters, the pharmacist at Riverside Pharmacy. I have a prescription here for a patient, Jennifer Castellanos, for a medication called Temporazine. I'm not familiar with this drug and can't find it in any of my reference materials. Could you please call me back at 503-555-0147 to discuss? I'm here until midnight. Thank you. I left the message and hung up, feeling slightly uneasy for reasons I couldn't quite articulate. While I waited for a callback that I suspected wouldn't come until morning, I decided to look up Dr. Harlow's credentials. He'd been prescribing to our pharmacy for years. A general practitioner with a decent reputation, nothing remarkable. I'd spoken to him dozens of times about various patient matters, and he'd always been professional and knowledgeable. His medical license was active and in good standing according to the Oregon Medical Board website. Everything checked out. Then I searched for the patient, Jennifer Castellanos. Our pharmacy system showed she was a regular customer, though I didn't personally recognize the name. She'd filled prescriptions with us before, fairly standard stuff. Birth control pills, occasional antibiotics, over-the-counter allergy medication purchases tracked through her rewards card. There was nothing in her profile that suggested she had any rare or unusual medical conditions that might require an obscure medication. At 9:45 p.m., a woman walked into the pharmacy. She was thin, perhaps in her late 20s, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes that held a strange, almost desperate quality. She wore jeans and a gray hoodie, and she approached the counter with quick, nervous steps. "Hi, I'm here to pick up a prescription," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "Jennifer Castellanos." My stomach tightened. The timing was too coincidental. "Ms. Castellanos," I said, keeping my voice professional and calm. "I do have a prescription here for you, but I'm having some difficulty verifying the medication. Can you tell me what your doctor prescribed for you?" She blinked at me, and for just a moment I saw something flash across her face. Was it fear? Recognition? "It's called Temporazine," she said. "Dr. Harlow prescribed it for my condition." "I see," I said carefully. "And what condition is that, if you don't mind me asking?" "I need to verify the appropriateness of the medication, and I'm not familiar with this particular drug." Her hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles turning white. "It's for temporal displacement syndrome," she said, the words coming out rushed and rehearsed as if she'd been practicing them. "It's rare, very rare. Dr. Harlow is one of the only physicians who treats it." Temporal displacement syndrome. I'd completed 4 years of undergraduate study in biology and chemistry, 4 years of pharmacy school, and had been practicing for a decade. I'd never heard of temporal displacement syndrome. It sounded like something from a science fiction novel, not a legitimate medical diagnosis. "Ms. Castellanos, I'm sorry, but I can't fill this prescription," I said, trying to keep my tone gentle but firm. I've searched every drug database available to me, and Temporazine doesn't appear in any of them. Additionally, I'm not familiar with the diagnosis you mentioned. I need to speak with Dr. Harlow directly before I can dispense this medication. I've left him a message, but his office is closed for the evening. Her face went pale, and I saw her start to tremble. "You don't understand," she whispered, leaning closer to the counter. "I need that medication. I need it tonight. If I don't take it—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to the clock on the wall behind me. It read 9:52 p.m. "If you don't take it, what?" I asked, genuinely concerned now. Despite my confusion about the prescription, the woman's distress seemed real and urgent. "The displacement," she said, her voice barely audible. "It happens at 10:07 p.m. It always happens at 10:07 p.m. The medication stabilizes me, keeps me anchored to this timeline. Without it, I slip." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. This woman either had a serious mental health condition that required immediate attention, or something far stranger was happening. "Ms. Castellanos, I think you might need to go to the emergency room," I said gently. "If you're experiencing a medical crisis—" "They can't help me there," she said, her voice rising in panic. "They don't have Temporazine. You're the only pharmacy that fills it. Please, you have to check your system again. Check your inventory. It has to be there." To humor her, or perhaps because her fear was infectious, I turned back to my computer and searched our inventory system once more. Temporazine. No results. I tried different search parameters, looked through recently received stock, checked our order history for anything unusual. Nothing. "I'm sorry," I said, turning back to her. "We don't have this medication in stock, and even if we did, I couldn't ethically dispense something I can't verify as safe and appropriate." Jennifer Castellanos backed away from the counter, her face a mask of terror. "What time is it?" she asked, though she was staring directly at the clock. "It's 9:58, I said. 9 minutes, she whispered. "I have 9 minutes. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and started dialing. I heard her speaking rapidly to someone, though I couldn't make out all the words. "Pharmacy won't fill it. Says it's not in the system. I don't know what to do. Yes, I'm sure it's almost time." She ended the call and looked at me with eyes that seemed to reflect some private horror I couldn't comprehend. "You're going to see," she said. "At 10:07 you're going to see, and then you'll understand." "See what?" I asked, feeling a cold dread settling in my chest. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the waiting area near the front windows and sat down in one of the plastic chairs, her gaze fixed on the clock. I should have called for help, perhaps the police or mental health services. But something kept me frozen watching her, waiting for whatever she believed was going to happen. The minutes crawled by. 10 p.m., 10:03 p.m. The pharmacy was utterly silent except for the hum of the refrigeration units in the back. 10:05 p.m. Jennifer sat rigid in her chair, both hands gripping the armrests. 10:06 p.m. I realized I was holding my breath. At exactly 10:07 p.m., Jennifer Castellanos began to flicker. There's no other word for it. Her image became unstable, like a television with poor reception. For a fraction of a second, I saw her sitting in the chair. Then she was standing by the door. Then she was at the counter again. Then she was gone entirely. Then back in the chair. The transitions weren't smooth, they were instantaneous, jumping from position to position with no movement in between. And in some of those flickers, she looked different. Older in one instant, younger in another. Wearing different clothes. Her hair longer, then shorter, then a different color entirely. I staggered backward, knocking over a bottle of ibuprofen that had been sitting on the counter. The bottle hit the floor and pills scattered everywhere, the sound impossibly loud in the silent pharmacy. The flickering continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 or 20 seconds. Then Jennifer was back, stable, sitting in the chair, her face in her hands, sobbing. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely think. Everything I knew about reality, about physics, about how the world worked had just been torn apart. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to convince myself I'd had a psychotic break or had been drugged somehow. But I knew what I'd seen was real. "What?" I started, my voice cracking. "What are you?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm just a person," she said. "A person who got caught in a temporal accident 3 years ago. There was an experiment. I was working at a research facility in Seattle. Something went wrong. Ever since then, I've been unstable, unanchored. Every night at 10:07 p.m., I drift through different timelines, different versions of myself. The Temporazine keeps me stable, keeps me locked into this reality, but that medication doesn't exist," I said, my mind struggling to process what she was telling me. "It doesn't exist yet," she corrected. "Not in this timeline. In the timeline I originally came from, Temporazine was developed in 2019 to treat temporal displacement syndrome, a condition that affected about 40 people worldwide after a series of failed quantum experiments. But I'm not in that timeline anymore. I haven't been since the accident. I've been jumping through similar timelines, parallel realities where things are almost the same but not quite. And in each one, I find a version of Dr. Harlow who understands, who helps me, who prescribes the medication. But how do you get the medication if it doesn't exist here?" I asked, my scientific mind trying to find logic in the impossible. "It does exist," she said, "just not in your databases. There's a facility, I can't tell you exactly where, they made me promise, where they're developing it in secret. Dr. Harlow has connections there. He gets me the supply. Your pharmacy has been filling these prescriptions for 6 months. Check your physical inventory, not the computer. Bottle 4473 in the controlled substance safe. That's where you keep it." I knew I shouldn't trust her. This all sounded insane, but I'd just watched a woman flicker through different versions of reality, and my grip on what was possible had shattered. Moving automatically, I unlocked the controlled substance safe in the back of the pharmacy and searched for bottle 4473. It was there. A white bottle with a professional pharmaceutical label reading Temporazine 50ml tablets, and a lot number and expiration date that looked completely legitimate. The medication inside looked like ordinary white tablets. My hands trembled as I pulled the bottle out and stared at it. This shouldn't exist. According to every database, every reference material, every search I'd conducted, this medication wasn't real. And yet, I was holding it. I brought the bottle to the counter, my mind reeling. "I don't understand," I said. "Why isn't this in the computer system?" "Because you don't remember filling it," Jennifer said, her voice tired. "Every time I jump timelines, reality resets slightly. People's memories adjust to match the new timeline. You've probably filled this prescription a dozen times, but each time you forget. The only reason you notice something was wrong tonight is because I'm unstable. My presence is causing temporal disruptions. The more I drift, the more the inconsistencies show up." I wanted to argue, to insist this couldn't be true, but I was holding physical evidence that contradicted everything I thought I knew. With shaking hands, I counted out 90 tablets into a prescription bottle, typed up a label using the information from the screen, even though every instinct told me this was wrong, and handed it to Jennifer Castellanos. "Thank you," she said, immediately opening the bottle and swallowing 2 tablets dry. "The next dose will stabilize me for tonight. By tomorrow, reality will have adjusted again. You probably won't remember this conversation. You'll just fill my prescriptions like always." "But I will remember," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. "I have to remember. This is too significant to forget." She gave me a sad smile. "That's what you said last time." She gathered her medication and walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know how disturbing this must be, but in the morning it won't seem so impossible. That's how timeline adjustment works. Your brain will find a way to rationalize it, to make it fit into a worldview you can accept." The electronic chime sounded as she left, and I watched her walk across the parking lot and disappear into the darkness. I stood at the counter for a long time, staring at the bottle of Temporazine in the controlled substance safe, trying to cement every detail of the encounter into my memory. When I arrived for work the next evening, I immediately checked the controlled substance safe. Bottle 4473 was there, but it was labeled as alprazolam, a common anti-anxiety medication. I searched through every bottle, every shelf, every drawer. No Temporazine. I checked the computer system for Jennifer Castellanos. Her prescription history showed regular fills for birth control and antibiotics. Nothing unusual. I called Dr. Harlow's office and asked about Jennifer Castellanos and any unusual prescriptions. The receptionist politely told me that Dr. Harlow had prescribed nothing out of the ordinary for that patient. When I mentioned Temporazine, there was a long pause. "I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that medication," she said. "Are you sure you have the right doctor?" For weeks afterward, I questioned my sanity. Had I experienced a psychotic episode, a vivid hallucination, some kind of chemical exposure that caused delusions? But the memory remained crystalline and detailed, refusing to fade the way dreams do. I became obsessed with searching for any information about temporal displacement, quantum experiments, timeline theory. Nothing I found could explain what I'd witnessed. Then, exactly 1 month later, Jennifer Castellanos walked into the pharmacy at 9:45 p.m. She approached the counter and I felt my heart rate spike. "Hi, I'm here to pick up a prescription," she said casually, as if she'd never met me before. "Jennifer Castellanos. What medication?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Oh, just my birth control refill," she said, looking at me strangely. "Is everything okay? You look pale." I filled her prescription in silence, searching her face for any sign of recognition. There was none. She was different somehow. Her hair was styled differently. She seemed a bit more relaxed, less haunted. When I handed her the medication, I said, "Do you know what Temporazine is?" She frowned. "No, sorry." "Is that something I should be taking? Did my doctor call something in?" "No," I said quietly, "and never mind. Have a good night." She left and I immediately checked the computer system and the controlled substance safe. No Temporazine, no unusual prescriptions, just a routine birth control refill for an ordinary patient. But I remember, against all logic, against what Jennifer said would happen, I remember everything. The flickering, the impossible medication, the woman caught between timelines. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the one who's displaced, if I'm stuck remembering a reality that no longer exists, unable to adjust to the timeline I now inhabit. I still work the night shift at Riverside Pharmacy. I still fill prescriptions with meticulous care. But now, every time a prescription comes through for a medication I don't recognize, every time something seems slightly off in my database, I pause and wonder. How many other impossible things exist in the margins of reality? How many other people are slipping between timelines, carrying with them medications and conditions that don't exist in the world I think I know? The scientific method requires reproducible results and empirical evidence. I have neither. Only a memory that refuses to fade and a growing suspicion that the universe is far stranger and more unstable than any of us dare to believe. And late at night, when the pharmacy is empty and silent, I sometimes find myself watching the clock, waiting for 10:07 p.m., wondering if reality will flicker again and reveal its impossible seams. Story 2. The Patient Who Kept Dying. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been a pharmacist for 15 years. The last 8 spent working overnight shifts at Oakwood Pharmacy in a suburb of Chicago. I'm 41 years old, married with 2 kids, and I've always considered myself pragmatic and level-headed. The pharmacy is located in a relatively quiet neighborhood, attached to a 24-hour grocery store serving primarily insomniacs, shift workers, and people dealing with emergencies that can't wait until morning. In all my years on the night shift, I'd seen plenty of strange situations. People in various states of medical crisis, individuals clearly struggling with addiction, the occasional robbery attempt that security handled swiftly. But nothing in my experience prepared me for Thomas Whitmore and the impossible loop that began on March 3, 2024. The night started normally enough. I arrived at 10 p.m. for my shift, relieved my colleague Denise, who always worked the evening hours, and settled into the familiar routine of checking prescriptions, managing inventory, and helping the occasional customer who wandered in. The store was moderately busy for a Friday night, people picking up medications before the weekend, stocking up on supplies, the usual traffic. Around 11:15 p.m., an elderly man approached the pharmacy counter. He appeared to be in his mid-70s with thin white hair, glasses with thick lenses, and a slightly stooped posture that suggested years of physical labor. He wore a cardigan sweater over a button-up shirt, dress pants that were a bit too large, and walking shoes that had seen better days. His skin had that papery quality common in older adults, with age spots visible on his hands and face. He moved slowly but steadily, and when he reached the counter, he gave me a polite smile. "Good evening," he said, his voice surprisingly strong despite his frail appearance. "I need to pick up a prescription for Thomas Whitmore. Should be blood pressure medication." I pulled up his information in our system. Thomas Whitmore, age 76, address in a nearby residential area. The prescription was indeed for lisinopril, a common blood pressure medication prescribed by Dr. Sarah Morrison. Everything was straightforward. I retrieved the medication from our shelves, verified the dosage, and began the process of checking him out. "Have you taken this medication before, Mr. Whitmore?" I asked, following standard procedure. "Oh yes, been on it for years," he replied. "Keeps the blood pressure in check. Getting old isn't for the weak, you know." He chuckled at his own joke. I smiled and nodded, appreciating his good humor. "Any questions about your medication or any side effects you've been experiencing?" No, everything's fine. Just need to keep the old ticker going a bit longer." He paid for his prescription, thanked me warmly, and walked toward the exit. I watched him go, noting his slightly unsteady gait, but seeing nothing that alarmed me. Just another routine prescription fill for another regular customer. At 11:47 p.m., I heard a commotion near the front of the store. Raised voices, someone shouting for help. My stomach dropped. Medical emergencies in the store weren't common, but weren't unheard of either. I grabbed the emergency medical kit we kept behind the pharmacy counter and rushed toward the sound. A small crowd had gathered near the checkout lanes. In the center, lying on the linoleum floor, was Thomas Whitmore. A store employee was already calling 911, while another customer, a young woman who identified herself as a nursing student, was checking for a pulse. I knelt down beside Mr. Whitmore, and my medical training immediately kicked in. His face was gray, his eyes were half open and unfocused, and he wasn't breathing. The nursing student looked at me with frightened eyes. "No pulse," she said. "I think he's had a heart attack." We started CPR immediately. I did chest compressions while the nursing student performed rescue breaths. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Each second felt like an hour, but the whole event seemed to happen in a blur. Other customers backed away, giving us space. Some watched with horrified fascination, others turned away, unable to witness the scene. The store manager arrived with an automated external defibrillator, and we applied the pads to Mr. Whitmore's chest. The machine analyzed his rhythm. "Shock advised," it announced in its calm, robotic voice. We cleared away. The machine delivered the shock, and Mr. Whitmore's body convulsed. We resumed CPR. The paramedics arrived 7 minutes after the initial call. I know because I'd been compulsively checking the clock, counting the minutes, knowing that brain damage from oxygen deprivation became increasingly likely after 4 minutes. They took over, working with professional efficiency, administering medications, continuing advanced cardiac life support. After several more minutes of effort, they loaded Mr. Whitmore onto a stretcher and transported him to the ambulance, still performing CPR as they went. One of the paramedics turned to me before leaving. "Thanks for the quick response," he said. "Don't see many people jump in like that." But his eyes told me what he didn't say, that he didn't think Thomas Whitmore was going to make it. The rest of my shift was subdued. Customers who witnessed the event left quickly, uncomfortable with the reminder of mortality. The store manager thanked me for my help and asked if I needed to go home early. I declined. Staying busy seemed better than going home and replaying the scene in my mind. I cleaned and restocked the emergency medical kit, though my hands shook slightly as I did so. I'd been trained in CPR and emergency response, but training scenarios never captured the reality of trying to save an actual human life and potentially failing. Around 2 a.m., when things had quieted down, I looked up Thomas Whitmore in our pharmacy system to see if there were any family contacts listed. There was a phone number listed for his wife, Margaret Whitmore. I debated calling her, wondering if the hospital had already notified her, or if it would be appropriate for me to reach out. In the end, I decided it wasn't my place. The hospital would handle family notifications. Still, I couldn't shake the image of him lying on that floor lifeless just 30 minutes after I'd handed him his blood pressure medication and watched him walk away. The next night, Saturday, I arrived for my shift at 10 p.m. The events of the previous evening still weighed heavily on my mind, and I'd spent much of my Saturday afternoon wondering if Thomas Whitmore had survived. I'd even considered calling the hospital to inquire, but patient privacy laws made that complicated, and I wasn't family. As I was logging into the pharmacy computer system, beginning my nightly routine, something caught my attention in the corner of my vision. An elderly man was approaching the pharmacy counter. Thin white hair, thick glasses, cardigan sweater, moving with that distinctive, slightly stooped posture. My blood ran cold. It was Thomas Whitmore. He reached the counter and smiled at me exactly as he had the night before. "Good evening," he said. "I need to pick up a prescription for Thomas Whitmore. Should be blood pressure medication." I stared at him, unable to speak, my mind completely unable to process what I was seeing. This man had died. Or at least he'd been in cardiac arrest, receiving CPR, transported by ambulance in critical condition. There was virtually no way he could be standing in front of me less than 24 hours later, looking perfectly healthy, acting as if nothing had happened. "Sir," I finally managed to say, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "Were you here last night?" He looked confused. "Last night? No, I don't think so. Why do you ask?" "You didn't, There wasn't a medical emergency?" I asked, studying his face for any sign that he was joking or confused or suffering from memory loss. "A medical emergency?" No, I'm fine. Just here for my prescription." He seemed genuinely puzzled by my questions. I pulled up his record again. Thomas Whitmore, same address, same prescription for lisinopril. According to the system, his last fill had been 30 days ago, which was correct. He'd picked it up from my colleague Denise during an evening shift. There was no record of him picking anything up the previous night at 11:15 p.m. But I remembered filling that prescription. I remembered checking him out, watching him walk away, and then less than an hour later performing CPR on his body. "Mr. Whitmore," I said carefully, "have you been feeling all right? Any cardiac symptoms? Chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness? "Oh, I'm fine, son," he said, waving away my concern. "The blood pressure medicine keeps everything stable. Dr. Morrison says I'm doing remarkably well for my age." He paused. "You look pale. Are you feeling all right?" I must have looked unwell because I felt like I was losing my mind. I processed his prescription mechanically, my hands moving through the familiar motions while my brain screamed that this was impossible. Thomas Whitmore paid, thanked me, and walked toward the exit. I watched him intently, noting every detail. His gait was steady, his color was good. He showed no signs of cardiac distress. He disappeared through the automatic doors into the parking lot. I immediately called the hospital where the ambulance had taken him the night before. After being transferred 3 times and explaining that I was a pharmacist following up on a patient, I finally reached someone in the emergency department who could access records. "I'm looking for information on Thomas Whitmore, age 76, who should have been brought in last night around midnight in cardiac arrest," I said. There was a pause and the sound of typing. "I'm not showing any patient by that name admitted or treated in the last 48 hours, the nurse said. "Are you sure he was brought to this facility?" "The ambulance came from the grocery store on Oakwood and Main," I said. "This is the closest hospital. Where else would they have taken him?" "That would definitely be us," she confirmed. "But I'm telling you, we have no record of treating anyone by that name. Is it possible you have the date wrong?" I thanked her and hung up, feeling a growing sense of wrongness that I couldn't explain. Either I'd experienced some kind of detailed hallucination the previous night, which seemed impossible because the nursing student, the store employees, the paramedics, dozens of customers had all witnessed the same event, or something far stranger was happening. At exactly 11:47 p.m., I heard screaming from the front of the store. My entire body went numb. No, it couldn't be happening again. But I knew it was. I grabbed the emergency medical kit and ran toward the sound, and there, on the linoleum floor near the checkout lanes, was Thomas Whitmore. Gray face, not breathing, no pulse. The exact same scene as the night before. The same nursing student was there again. How was that possible? She looked at me with frightened recognition. "It's him again," she whispered. "The same man from last night. How is this the same man?" But there was no time to discuss the impossibility of the situation. We started CPR. The AED was applied. The shock was delivered. The paramedics arrived. Thomas Whitmore was loaded into the ambulance, still receiving chest compressions. After the ambulance left, I stood in the middle of the store, shaking. The nursing student approached me, her face pale. "That was him, wasn't it? The same man who died here last night?" "Yes," I said, because there was no point in denying it. "But he was here an hour ago. He picked up his prescription. He was fine." "That's impossible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. We'd both seen the impossible. The following night, Sunday, I arrived at work with a sense of dread so profound I'd almost called in sick. But I needed to know if it would happen again. At 11:15 p.m., I watched the front entrance of the store like a hawk. At exactly 11:13 p.m., Thomas Whitmore entered the building and walked toward the pharmacy. I felt like I was watching a recording play for the 3rd time. He approached the counter with his characteristic polite smile. "Good evening," he began, and I interrupted him. "Mr. Whitmore, you need to leave. Right now. Don't ask questions, just trust me and leave the store." He looked startled. "I'm sorry. I just need to pick up my prescription. You can get it tomorrow during the day. Please, you cannot be in this store at 11:47 p.m. It's a matter of life and death." I was begging now, not caring how insane I sounded. He took a step back, clearly disturbed by my intensity. "Young man, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I've been coming to this pharmacy for 15 years and I've never been treated so rudely. I'm going to speak to your manager." He turned and walked away from the pharmacy counter, but instead of leaving the store, he headed toward the customer service desk. I watched the clock. 11:20 p.m., 11:30 p.m., 11:40 p.m. I left the pharmacy counter, ignoring the confused questions from a customer who needed assistance, and searched the store for Thomas Whitmore. I found him standing in the cereal aisle, apparently calmed down and doing some grocery shopping while waiting to file his complaint. 11:45 p.m. 2 minutes. "Mr. Whitmore, please," I said, approaching him. "I know I sound crazy, but something terrible is going to happen to you in the next 2 minutes. You need to leave. Right now." He looked at me with a mixture of pity and alarm. "Son, I think you need help. Maybe you should take a break, talk to someone." 11:47 p.m. Thomas Whitmore clutched his chest. His face went gray. His eyes widened in terror and surprise, and he collapsed into my arms. I lowered him to the floor as gently as I could, and once again I began CPR. Once again the nursing student appeared, and this time I realized she was a night shift employee at the store, not just a customer, which explained why she was there repeatedly. Once again the paramedics came. Once again Thomas Whitmore was transported away in critical condition. This pattern continued for 6 consecutive nights. Each night, Thomas Whitmore would enter the store around 11:13, 11:15 p.m. with no memory of previous visits or cardiac arrests. Each night, despite my increasingly desperate attempts to warn him or prevent his presence, he would suffer cardiac arrest at exactly 11:47 p.m. I tried everything. On the 4th night, I refused to fill his prescription, hoping he'd leave immediately. He simply went shopping while waiting to complain to management, and died in the snack aisle at 11:47 p.m. On the 5th night, I physically tried to escort him out of the store. He became agitated, security was called, and in the confusion, he collapsed at 11:47 p.m. On the 6th night, I called the police at 11:15 p.m. and reported a medical patient who needed immediate evaluation. They arrived at 11:35 p.m., spent 12 minutes assessing him and determining he was fine, and left at 11:46 p.m. 1 minute later, cardiac arrest. Each morning after my shift, I would call the hospital. Each time, there was no record of Thomas Whitmore being treated. Each evening when I arrived for work, I would check our pharmacy system, and there would be no record of him picking up medication the night before. But I had witnesses: the nursing student, various customers, store employees, security guards, paramedics. They all saw the same thing I did. And yet, the next night, Thomas Whitmore would return alive and healthy with no memory of dying. On the 7th night, Monday, March 11th, I decided to try something different. When Thomas Whitmore approached at 11:15 p.m., I filled his prescription quickly and asked him if he had a few minutes to answer some health-related questions. He agreed, always polite despite my previous erratic behavior. I led him to a private consultation room we had in the pharmacy. "Mr. Whitmore, I need you to answer some questions honestly," I said. "Do you believe in anything supernatural? Life after death? Parallel universes? Anything like that?" He looked puzzled but thoughtful. "Well, I suppose I believe in heaven. I was raised Catholic, though I'm not as devout as I once was. Why do you ask? Do you have any sense of repetition in your life? Like you're living the same experiences over and over? You mean like that movie Groundhog Day?" He chuckled. "No, can't say I do. Every day feels new to me, even at my age." I glanced at the clock. 11:38 p.m. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully. You're going to die in 9 minutes. His face went through several expressions: confusion, offense, fear. "What are you talking about? Is that a threat?" No, not a threat. A warning. You're caught in some kind of loop. Every night for the past 6 nights, you've come into this store, picked up your prescription, and at exactly 11:47 p.m., you've had a fatal heart attack. And then the next night, you're back. alive, with no memory of dying. I don't know why it's happening or how to stop it, but I've watched you die 6 times. He stood up, his face flushed with anger. This is absurd. I'm reporting you to your supervisor and to the pharmacy board. You're clearly having some kind of breakdown. He opened the door of the consultation room and walked out. I followed him, watching the clock. 11:44 p.m. He headed toward the customer service desk, but before he could get there, he stopped, wobbled slightly, and put a hand to his chest. His expression changed from anger to fear to pain in rapid succession. 11:47 p.m. he collapsed. I was already moving toward him, medical kit in hand, preparing for the same terrible routine. But something was different this time. As I began chest compressions, as the familiar scene unfolded around me, Thomas Whitmore opened his eyes. While I was actively doing CPR, while his heart wasn't beating and he wasn't breathing, he looked directly at me with full consciousness and awareness. I remember, he said, though his lips didn't move, and I heard his voice inside my head rather than through my ears. I remember dying. I remember all of it. Why can't I stop? Why does it keep happening? I was so shocked I nearly stopped compressions, but my training kept my hands moving. I don't know, I said aloud, not caring that the gathering crowd would think I was talking to a corpse. I've been trying to help you, but nothing works. It's the medication, he said, his voice in my mind growing fainter. The blood pressure medicine. Don't let me take it. Next time, don't let me take it. Then he was gone. Fully gone this time, not just unconscious, but absent in a way I couldn't quite define. The paramedics arrived and took over, but I knew it was futile. They transported him away, and I stood in the middle of the store, covered in sweat, my arms aching from 7 nights of CPR, trying to process what he'd told me. The next night, Tuesday, when Thomas Whitmore walked into the store at 11:15 p.m., I was ready. He approached the pharmacy counter with his usual polite greeting, requested his prescription, and I told him the most convincing lie of my life. Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry, but there's been a recall on your blood pressure medication. The manufacturer discovered a potential contamination issue. I can't dispense it tonight. You'll need to contact Dr. Morrison tomorrow to get a prescription for an alternative medication. He looked concerned. A recall? Is it serious? Should I be worried? The risk is very low, but the FDA requires we don't dispense any from the affected lot, I said smoothly. You should be fine for a day or 2 without it. Your blood pressure has been stable. Just call your doctor first thing tomorrow. He accepted this explanation, thanked me, and left the store. I watched the clock with a mixture of hope and terror. 11:30 p.m. 11:40 p.m. 11:47 p.m. came and went. No cardiac arrest, no Thomas Whitmore collapsing on the floor. At midnight, I closed the pharmacy for the night, feeling a complex mixture of relief and confusion. The following evening, Wednesday, received a phone call from Dr. Morrison's office. We're calling about Thomas Whitmore, the receptionist said. Dr. Morrison wanted to know why his prescription wasn't filled last night and why we're getting a message about a recall. We haven't received any recall notices. I explained that there had been a miscommunication and apologized for the confusion. The receptionist informed me that Mr. Whitmore had come in for an emergency appointment that morning and had been found to have dangerously elevated blood pressure. So high, in fact, that Dr. Morrison had sent him directly to the hospital for evaluation and treatment. The receptionist also mentioned that Mr. Whitmore had complained of strange symptoms, severe anxiety, a sense of impending doom, and vivid nightmares about dying repeatedly. I never saw Thomas Whitmore again. I checked our prescription records obsessively for weeks afterward. Dr. Morrison had switched him to a different blood pressure medication, which he picked up during day shifts from other pharmacists. Eventually, I worked up the courage to call Dr. Morrison directly and ask about Mr. Whitmore's condition. She told me with a note of puzzlement in her voice that after the hospitalization, his cardiac health had actually improved dramatically. The episode of critically high blood pressure seemed to be an anomaly, and he was now stable and doing well. I never learned what was in that specific batch of lisinopril that I'd been dispensing to him or why it created such an impossible loop. I reported the issue to the manufacturer, to the FDA, to everyone I could think of, but without the physical pills which Thomas Whitmore had taken with him on the first night, and which I'd never actually dispensed on subsequent nights. There was nothing to test, no evidence to examine. The nursing student who'd been present for those repeated resuscitation attempts approached me weeks later during a shift. "I still dream about it," she told me, "watching that man die over and over. But when I try to remember the details, they slip away like trying to remember a dream. Did it really happen? Sometimes I think I imagined all of it." "It happened," I assured her, though I understood her confusion. The human mind resists accepting the impossible, and memory becomes unreliable when confronted with events that defy the laws of reality. I still work the night shift at Oakwood Pharmacy. I still fill prescriptions and help customers and deal with the routine chaos of healthcare at odd hours. But now I pay closer attention to patterns that seem too consistent, to customers who appear repeatedly in ways that feel wrong, to medications that might be more than they seem. I've learned that pharmaceuticals aren't just chemicals that interact with our bodies. Sometimes they interact with reality itself in ways we don't understand and can't predict. And late at night, when I'm alone in the pharmacy and the store is quiet, I sometimes wonder how many other Thomas Whitmores are out there trapped in loops of their own, dying and returning, caught in cycles they don't remember and can't escape. The thought keeps me awake long after my shift ends as I drive home through the empty streets, watching the clock, always watching the clock, making sure I never arrive anywhere at exactly 11:47 p.m. Story 3. The Prescription from the Dead. My name is Sarah Brennan, and I've worked as a night shift pharmacist at Pinewood Pharmacy in rural Vermont for 12 years. I'm 39 years old, divorced, no children, and I've spent most of my adult life in this small town where everyone knows everyone and secrets are hard to keep. The pharmacy is a standalone building on Main Street, one of those old structures with character, exposed brick walls, creaking wooden floors, and tall windows that rattle when the wind blows hard. We serve a community of about 4,000 people spread across the surrounding farmland and forests. Night shifts are usually quiet, with maybe 5 or 6 customers on an average evening, mostly picking up prescriptions after their day jobs or dealing with sudden illness. Nothing dramatic ever happened here, which was exactly why I'd chosen this place after my divorce. I wanted peace, predictability, routine. That all changed on October 17, 2023, when I received a prescription from a patient who'd been dead for 3 weeks. The evening started cold and clear, the way October evenings often do in Vermont. I could see my breath in the air when I arrived at 6 p.m. to open the pharmacy for the night shift. We stayed open until 9 p.m. on weekdays, serving the handful of people who needed after-hours service. My technician, Bradley, a recent pharmacy school graduate in his mid-20s, was working with me that night. He was enthusiastic but still learning, and I enjoyed mentoring him, passing along the practical knowledge that no textbook could teach. Around 7:30 p.m., the computer chimed to indicate a new electronic prescription had arrived. Bradley checked the notification. "We've got a prescription coming in from Dr. Reynolds," he said, pulling up the details on screen. "Patient is Eleanor Hartley. Looks like it's for morphine sulfate, extended release 30 milligrams. Eleanor Hartley. The name hit me like a physical blow, and I felt the blood drain from my face. Bradley noticed my reaction immediately. "Dr. Brennan, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." In a way, I had. Eleanor Hartley had been one of my regular patients for the past 8 years I'd known her. She was an elderly woman, 84 years old when she'd passed away, who'd been battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'd filled her pain medications faithfully, watched her decline over 18 months, spoken with her family members about medication management and side effects. I'd attended her funeral 3 weeks ago on September 26th. I'd signed the sympathy card the pharmacy staff had sent to her daughter. Eleanor Hartley was definitively, undeniably dead. "That's impossible," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Eleanor Hartley died last month." Bradley frowned and looked back at the computer screen. "Are you sure? I mean, maybe it's a different Eleanor Hartley? Same name, different person? In a town of 4,000 people, where I personally filled her prescriptions for 8 years? I moved to the computer and examined the prescription details myself. Patient name, Eleanor Hartley. Date of birth matching exactly. Same address, the farmhouse on Ridge Road where she'd lived for 60 years. The prescription was for morphine sulfate ER, 30 milligrams, quantity 60 tablets. Directions to take 1 tablet twice daily for chronic pain. It was identical to the prescription I'd filled for her monthly when she was alive. The prescriber was listed as Dr. James Reynolds, Eleanor's primary oncologist, the doctor who'd managed her cancer care. I'd spoken to Dr. Reynolds dozens of times about Eleanor's medications, coordinating her pain management, adjusting dosages as her condition deteriorated. He would absolutely know she was dead. He'd been the one to sign the death certificate. "There has to be a mistake in the system," Bradley said, trying to find a logical explanation. "Maybe it's an old prescription that somehow got resubmitted electronically. A glitch in the insurance company's system?" I checked the prescription timestamp. It had been sent electronically at 7:22 p.m., 8 minutes ago. Electronic prescriptions don't just randomly resurface from months or years ago. They're created in real time by physicians in their prescribing software. Someone right now had entered this prescription into the system. "I'm calling Dr. Reynolds," I said, picking up the pharmacy phone. I dialed his office number, which I knew by heart after years of coordinating patient care. The phone rang 4 times before going to the after-hours answering service. I left a message asking Dr. Reynolds to call me urgently regarding a prescription concern for Eleanor Hartley, providing my direct pharmacy number. While we waited for a callback, I did what any pharmacist would do. I began investigating. I checked Eleanor Hartley's patient profile in our system. Her last filled prescription had been on September 18th, 8 days before her death. The profile showed her as a deceased patient, a notation I'd added myself after returning from her funeral. There was a flag in the system preventing any further prescriptions from being processed. And yet, somehow, this new prescription had bypassed that flag. I checked the electronic prescription's metadata, the digital information embedded in every e-prescription that shows its origin. The prescription had definitely come from Dr. Reynolds' DEA number and NPI number. It had been transmitted through the state's prescription monitoring program and had been properly routed through the insurance verification system. Everything about it appeared legitimate except for the impossible fact that the patient was dead. "Maybe we should just reject the prescription," Bradley suggested. "Send it back through the system as unable to fill due to patient being deceased." But something stopped me from doing that. A nagging instinct, a feeling that there was more to this than a simple system error. "I want to wait for Dr. Reynolds to call back," I said. "If this is some kind of fraud, someone using a dead patient's information to get controlled substances, we need to report it properly." We continued with our evening work, filling other prescriptions, helping the few customers who came in. But my attention kept returning to that impossible prescription on my screen. At 8:15 p.m., my phone rang. I answered immediately. Pinewood Pharmacy, this is Sarah Brennan. Sarah, it's James Reynolds. I got your message about Eleanor Hartley. What's going on? Dr. Reynolds sounded tired, which wasn't unusual for an oncologist who carried the weight of his patient's suffering. Dr. Reynolds, I received an electronic prescription tonight for Eleanor Hartley, morphine sulfate. But Eleanor died 3 weeks ago. I attended her funeral. Did someone in your office accidentally submit an old prescription order? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Dr. Reynolds spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming careful and strained. Sarah, I did submit that prescription. About an hour ago. My hand tightened on the phone. I don't understand. You know she's dead. You signed her death certificate. I know this sounds insane, he said quietly. But I received a call today from Eleanor's daughter, Catherine. She told me that her mother needs more pain medication. When I tried to explain that Eleanor had passed away, Catherine became very upset. She insisted her mother was alive, at home, in pain, needing medication. She said I must be confused, thinking of a different patient. A chill ran down my spine. Dr. Reynolds, I was at the funeral. Catherine was there. She gave a eulogy. She was devastated. I know, he said, his voice heavy with confusion and something else, fear. I was there too. But when Catherine called me today, she had no memory of any funeral. She spoke about her mother in present tense, described caring for her at home, said the cancer was progressing, but that Eleanor was still fighting. I thought maybe she was having some kind of psychotic break brought on by grief. But Sarah, I checked my own records. I looked at Eleanor's file, and according to my documentation, she's alive. There's no death certificate in her chart. My notes show ongoing treatment. It's as if the past 3 weeks never happened. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. That's impossible. I know. But I don't know what else to tell you. I even drove by the Hartley farmhouse this evening before sending the prescription. There were lights on. I saw movement inside. Someone is living in that house. Her daughter lives there now, I said, but even as I spoke, I realized I wasn't certain of that. Where did Catherine live? Did she move into the farmhouse after her mother's death, or had she been living there all along? The memories felt slippery, difficult to grasp firmly. I submitted the prescription because I don't know what else to do, Dr. Reynolds continued. If Eleanor is somehow alive, she needs pain management. If she's not alive and this is all some elaborate confusion, then we'll sort it out. But I couldn't ignore a daughter's plea for her mother's pain medication, even if the situation makes no sense. After I hung up with Dr. Reynolds, I stood motionless for a long moment, trying to organize my thoughts. Bradley was watching me with concern. What did he say? I explained the conversation, and Bradley's eyes widened with each sentence. So what do we do? Do we fill it? I don't know, I admitted. First, I need to verify something. I pulled out my personal phone and opened Facebook, searching for Catherine Hartley's profile. I found it easily. We weren't friends, but her profile was public. I scrolled through her recent posts, photos from 2 days ago showing her with an elderly woman I recognized as Eleanor. The caption read, "Mom had a good day today. So grateful for every moment we have." The comments below were from friends and family wishing Eleanor well, praying for her strength. No condolences, no acknowledgement that she'd died. I scrolled back further, looking for posts from late September, around the time of the funeral. There was a gap in Catherine's posts from September 20th to September 28th, a week of nothing. Then posts resumed as if there had been no interruption, no funeral, no death, just ongoing updates about caring for her mother. "Bradley, do you remember Eleanor Hartley?" I asked. "She was a regular patient here for years." He thought for a moment. "The name sounds familiar, maybe." I've only been here for 4 months, though, so I might not have interacted with her much. She died in September. We sent flowers to her funeral. We signed a card. I walked to the small office in the back where we kept administrative records and began searching through our files. I found the folder where we documented pharmacy donations and condolences. There was no record of flowers sent to a Hartley funeral, no sympathy card, nothing. I returned to the computer and checked the staff schedule from late September. On September 26th, the day I was absolutely certain I'd attended Eleanor's funeral, I'd been scheduled to work the day shift. I'd worked that day. There was no indication I'd requested time off or left early for a funeral. But I had crystal clear memories of attending that service. The white casket, the flowers, the old Methodist church filled with mourners. Catherine's tearful eulogy, the reception afterward at the church hall where I'd spoken to Catherine and offered my condolences. "Sarah, you're freaking me out," Bradley said. "What's happening?" "I think reality has changed," I said, hearing how insane the words sounded even as I spoke them. "Either my memories are false, or something has altered the past 3 weeks so that Eleanor Hartley didn't die. And I'm the only one who remembers it differently." "That's not possible," Bradley said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Memories can be wrong. Maybe you're thinking of a different patient's funeral. Maybe you confused—" "I attended her funeral," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "I remember it in perfect detail. I wore my black dress with the gray cardigan. I sat in the 4th pew on the left side. The pastor was Reverend Michaels, and he spoke about Eleanor's faith and her love for her garden. Catherine read a poem that Eleanor had written years ago. The casket spray was white lilies and pink roses. I remember all of it." Bradley backed away slightly, and I realized I was frightening him with my intensity. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I'm sorry, I know this sounds crazy, but something is very wrong and I need to figure out what." The phone rang again. I answered it without checking the caller ID. "Pinewood Pharmacy." "Is this the pharmacy?" a woman's voice asked, sounding tired and strained. "This is Catherine Hartley. I'm calling about my mother's prescription. Dr. Reynolds said he sent it over an hour ago and we really need it. Mom is in so much pain." My mouth went dry. "Catherine, this is Sarah Brennan. I'm the pharmacist on duty tonight." "Oh, Sarah, thank goodness," Catherine said, her voice warming slightly with recognition. "I know it's getting late, but is there any way you could have Mom's prescription ready soon? I hate to ask, but she's having such a difficult evening." "Catherine," I said carefully, I need to ask you something. Do you remember your mother's funeral?" There was a confused pause. "What funeral?" "Sarah, what are you talking about? Mom's not dead. She's right here in the next room." "Catherine, I attended her funeral on September 26th, 3 weeks ago at the Methodist church. You gave a eulogy." "Sarah, are you feeling all right?" Catherine's voice had shifted from confusion to concern. "That didn't happen. Mom is alive. She's right here. Would you like me to put her on the phone?" A wave of vertigo washed over me. "Yes," I heard myself say. "Yes, please." There was rustling, muffled conversation, and then a different voice came on the line. Weak, frail, but unmistakably Eleanor Hartley's voice. "Hello? Sarah, dear, is that you?" Tears started running down my face without my permission. "Mrs. Hartley?" "Yes, dear. I hear there's some confusion about my prescription. I'm sorry to be a bother, but the pain has been quite bad today. I was talking to a dead woman, or I was having a psychotic break, or reality had somehow rearranged itself. I'll have your prescription ready in 20 minutes, I said, my voice shaking. Catherine can come pick it up. Thank you, dear. You've always been so kind to me. After we hung up, I stood holding the phone, my mind completely fragmented. Bradley was staring at me with a mixture of fear and pity. What do we do? He asked. We fill the prescription, I said. Because either I'm losing my mind, in which case filling a legitimate prescription is the professional thing to do, or reality has changed and Eleanor Hartley is somehow alive again, in which case she needs pain management. I filled the prescription mechanically, my hands performing the familiar tasks while my mind reeled. Count 60 morphine tablets. Verify the count. Print the label, attach it to the bottle, place it in a bag with the required information sheets. Every action was automatic, performed through muscle memory and professional training. 25 minutes later, Catherine Hartley walked into the pharmacy. She looked exactly as I remembered her, a woman in her late 50s with graying brown hair and kind eyes, wearing a fleece jacket and jeans. She approached the counter with a tired smile. "Thank you so much for getting this ready so quickly," she said. "I know it's an inconvenience." I studied her face, searching for any sign that she was lying or pretending or testing me somehow. I saw only genuine gratitude and the exhaustion of someone caring for a dying parent. "Catherine," I said quietly, handing her the prescription bag, "I need to ask you to do me a favor. I need you to tell me everything you remember about the past month." She looked puzzled, but apparently attributed my strange request to friendly concern. "Well, it's been hard," she said. "Mom's pain has been getting worse. The cancer is progressing, and Dr. Reynolds says we're probably looking at weeks rather than months now. I've been staying at the farmhouse full-time caring for her. The hospice nurse comes 3 times a week. We're just trying to keep her comfortable and spending as much time together as we can." "And you don't remember a funeral, a death certificate, any of that?" Catherine's expression shifted to alarm. "Sarah, no, nothing like that has happened. Are you okay? You seem really upset." "I'm fine," I lied, "just tired. Long shift. Thank you for coming by." After Catherine left, I turned to Bradley. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to search online for Eleanor Hartley's obituary. Check the local newspaper archives. See if you can find any record of her death." Bradley spent the next 20 minutes searching while I processed other prescriptions on autopilot. Finally, he looked up from the computer. "There's nothing," he said. "No obituary, no death notice, no funeral announcement. According to everything I can find online, Eleanor Hartley is alive and battling cancer." I drove to the Methodist church after my shift ended at 9 p.m. Reverend Michaels lived in the rectory next door, and I knocked on his door until he answered, looking concerned about the late-night visitor. "Sarah, is everything all right?" "Reverend Michaels, I need to ask you about Eleanor Hartley's funeral, the one you conducted on September 26th. He looked at me with genuine confusion. "Sarah, I haven't conducted a funeral for Eleanor Hartley. She's still alive as far as I know, still fighting her cancer with remarkable strength." "You gave the service," I insisted. "You spoke about her faith in her garden. There were white lilies and pink roses." Catherine read a poem Eleanor had written. Reverend Michaels put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, I think you might be overtired or confused. I've known Eleanor for 40 years, and I pray for her every day. When her time comes, I'll certainly conduct her service. But that hasn't happened yet." I drove home in a daze, parked in my driveway, and sat in my car for over an hour, trying to reconcile irreconcilable facts. I'd attended a funeral that apparently never happened. I'd filled final prescriptions for a patient who was still alive. I had clear, detailed memories that didn't match reality. Over the following weeks, I struggled with the implications. I considered that I might be experiencing false memories, perhaps brought on by stress or some neurological condition. I made an appointment with a doctor, underwent a full workup, including brain imaging. Everything came back normal. I had no history of psychotic disorders, no indicators of dementia or neurological damage. My memory function tested perfectly normal. I continued to fill prescriptions for Eleanor Hartley throughout November and into December. Each time I saw her name on a prescription, I felt a jolt of wrongness, but the world insisted she was alive, and I had no proof otherwise except my own impossible memories. I watched her decline through the prescriptions, increased pain medication, anti-nausea drugs, eventually prescriptions for end-of-life comfort care. Eleanor Hartley finally died on December 8, 2023. I received the notification from Dr. Reynolds' office on December 9th. This time, there was a funeral on December 14th at the Methodist Church. I attended, sitting in the fourth pew on the left side, watching Catherine give a tearful eulogy. The casket spray was white lilies and pink roses. Everything was exactly as I remembered from the funeral in September, except the date had changed. After the service, I approached Catherine at the reception. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "Thank you," she said, dabbing at her eyes with the tissue. "You know, it's strange, but I keep having this feeling that we've done this before, like I've already grieved and this is the second time. Does that sound crazy?" "No," I said quietly. "It doesn't sound crazy at all. I still work the night shift at Pinewood Pharmacy. I still fill prescriptions and help patients and maintain my professional duties. But I've learned something that no pharmacy school teaches and no continuing education course covers. Reality is more fragile than we believe. Time can loop back on itself, rewrite itself, create pockets where events happen twice or not at all. And sometimes, for reasons I may never understand, we're allowed to remember both versions, to carry the weight of timelines that no longer exist. I keep a journal now, documenting strange occurrences, inconsistencies, moments where my memories don't quite match the world around me. Sometimes I'll read an entry from weeks ago and have no memory of writing it, which terrifies me in new ways. Other times I'll remember events that my journal insists never happened. Eleanor Hartley's prescription bottle sits on a shelf in my home office, the one I filled on October 17, 2023, for a woman who was both dead and alive. I keep it as proof, though I don't know proof of what exactly. That time can be rewritten, that death isn't always permanent, that reality has glitches and inconsistencies that we're not meant to notice. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about all the other Eleanor Hartleys who might exist. Patients who've died and undied, prescriptions from the dead, futures that got rewritten so seamlessly that only one confused pharmacist notices the seams. And I wonder how many other people walk around carrying impossible memories, knowing something fundamental changed, but unable to prove it, unable to convince anyone else that the world we live in now isn't quite the same as the world we lived in yesterday. The pharmaceutical profession teaches us to measure, to document, to verify everything with precision and care. But some truths exist beyond measurement, in the gaps between what we know happened and what everyone else remembers. I learned that truth from a prescription that shouldn't exist for a patient who died before she died, in a reality that rewrote itself and left me standing alone with memories of a funeral that both did and didn't happen. And that's the most terrifying prescription of all. The knowledge that the world we think is solid and permanent and real is actually as changeable as words on a page, subject to being erased and rewritten at any moment, with most of us never noticing the edits. But I noticed, and now I can never stop noticing, never stop watching for the next inconsistency, the next glitch, the next moment when reality reveals its malleable nature and leaves me questioning everything I thought I knew about life, death, and the fragile boundary between them.